The thing that stuck with me from that whole mess wasn't the shouting, it was the paper. I teach history at a public high school on the northwest side of Chicago. Been there almost 9 years. My room is on the second floor, the one with the radiator that clangs like somebody's hitting it with a wrench every time the boiler kicks on in winter. February in Chicago, that radiator is basically a third student in the room. This was 2022. I'd taught the same unit on the civil rights movement every February since I started teaching. Same textbook, same primary sources, same clips from the newsreels. Nothing about it was new, nothing about it was even mine really. It was the district's approved curriculum, and I followed it. My kids read excerpts from the letter from a Birmingham jail. We watched about 10 minutes of the March on Washington. We did a Socratic seminar about the Voting Rights Act. 9th graders, 14 and 15-year-olds. That's it. That's the whole scandal. The first sign something was different came in the second week of the unit. The principal, a woman I'll just call Ms. B because she doesn't deserve to be in this story more than that, forwarded me an email. A parent had concerns. Could I respond? Fine. I responded. Sent her the syllabus, the source list, the state standards I was aligning to, normal stuff. That was a Monday. Wednesday, another email from another parent, same concerns, almost word for word. I want to be honest with you, I did not clock it right away. Parents complain, parents copy each other, parents share stuff in Facebook groups. That's how school works in 2022. I sent the second parent basically the same reply I sent the first. Moved on. Friday, third email. This one used the phrase divisive concepts and indoctrination. That's how they spelled it. Indoctrination. Missing an I. I remember I laughed a little, not in a mean way, just because I'd been reading angry emails all week and a typo landed funny. I hit reply, wrote another version of the same response, went home for the weekend. Monday morning, I had 2 more waiting in my inbox. Both used the word indoctrination. Same misspelling, same missing letter, same place. I opened all 5 emails in separate tabs and put them next to each other, sat there with my coffee going cold and read them slowly, one at a time, then side by side. They weren't identical. Whoever had drafted this was smart enough to shuffle the sentences around, swap in different opening lines, cut a paragraph here, add one there. But if you read them together, you could see it. Same phrases, same argument in the same order, same 3 examples of what they were objecting to, and none of those 3 examples were actually anywhere in my curriculum. And the same typo, every single email. I didn't tell anybody yet. I saved them to a folder called MES, and I kept teaching. The first in-person meeting was a Tuesday night. Ms. B had scheduled it after the 5th email came in, said we needed to get ahead of things. The library was set up with folding chairs, the kind that always feel one wrong shift away from folding themselves back up on you. I got there early and put my binder on the table and waited. 5 people came. Not 4, not 6. 5. 2 men, 3 women. I recognized 2 of them from back to school night. The other 3 I had never seen before, and I checked later, none of their kids were in any of my classes. Not one. They sat in a row. Each of them had a printed packet. White paper, stapled top left corner, the same font, the same margins. I could see it from where I was sitting. When the woman on the end flipped to page 2, I watched the woman next to her flip to page 2 half a second later, like she was following along in the same book. They took turns reading from the packets. I want to describe how this felt, because it's the part that's hard to get across. It wasn't scary in any movie way. There was no threat. Nobody yelled at me. They were very polite, actually, in the way people are polite when they've been told to be polite. One of the men, big guy in a Bears jacket, kept saying "sir" when he addressed me. "Sir, can you explain why you feel the need to?" "Sir, we're just concerned parents." He said "sir" the way a customer service script says "sir." I answered every question. I had my binder, I had the state standards, I had the approved reading list with the district's stamp on the front page. I could point to any objection they raised and match it to a bullet point in the framework. None of that mattered. They weren't there to be answered. They were there to be seen being there. When I finished responding, they'd nod, look down at their packets, and the next one in line would ask the next scripted question. Meeting ended around 9. I drove home on Irving Park with the heat cranked and I couldn't sleep that night. The second meeting was 2 weeks later. Same 5 people, same seats, in the same order, same packets. One of the women had a slightly newer packet. I could tell because the paper was whiter and the staple was cleaner, but the content when she read from it was almost the same as what the man to her left had read at the last meeting. They were rotating who said what. After that meeting, I went back up to my classroom instead of going home. I sat at my desk under the fluorescent light with the one bulb that hums, and I laid all the emails out on my desk, and I opened a spreadsheet on my laptop. Every phrase that appeared in more than one email or more than one meeting, every objection they raised, every source they claimed I was using that I wasn't, dates next to everything, saved it to 2 different drives and emailed a copy to myself for good measure. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like I was the one being paranoid. But you have to understand, when 5 strangers show up at your workplace on a Tuesday night with the same stapled packet and the same misspelled word, you stop worrying about whether you're imagining it. I talked to one other teacher about it, a woman down the hall who teaches English. I showed her one of the packets I'd managed to see over somebody's shoulder, and she looked at it for maybe 15 seconds and said, "Oh, they did this to a friend of mine in Naperville last year." That was it. She went back to grading, like it was a weather pattern. I called the union on a Thursday. Guy named Ray took the call. I told him the whole thing, the emails, the meetings, the packets, the typo. There was a long pause on his end. Then he said, "How fast can you send me everything you have?" I sent it that night. Ray called me back the next morning. He said they'd been seeing this pattern in other districts around the state. Not identical, but the shape of it. 5 parents, printed packets, coordinated emails with template language, names that don't match the class rosters. He didn't tell me who was behind it, and I didn't ask because I didn't actually want to know. What I wanted was for it to stop being my problem alone. The union took the case. They walked me through what to do. Document every class. Keep receipts on every source. Don't change the curriculum. Don't apologize for things I hadn't done. Don't respond to emails from parents whose kids weren't in my class. Forward those to the district. If the 5 came to another meeting, let them talk, take notes, don't argue. I started writing down my lesson content at the end of every day. Not just what was in the plan, what actually happened, what page we were on, which student asked which question, what I said in response. I have a green spiral notebook full of it. Still have it. It's in the drawer of my desk at school. The district opened a review. This is the part where a movie would give you a twist. There wasn't one. 2 people from the central office came in, sat in on a couple of my classes, looked at my lesson plans, compared them to the standards, interviewed a few other teachers, and about 6 weeks later, they issued a 1-page letter that said my curriculum was in compliance. The letter went to the 5 parents too. I got a copy. 2 of them pulled their kids out of the school after that. I heard through the grapevine they enrolled at a charter across town. 3 stayed. Their kids stayed in my class through the end of the year, and I taught them the same unit I taught everybody else, and I graded their essays the same way, and none of them ever gave me a hard time. The kids were fine. The kids were always fine. The 3 parents still show up at meetings. Not everyone, but enough of them. They don't bring the packets anymore. They bring themselves and they sit in the back and they don't say much. I think that's supposed to be the message. Here's the part I keep coming back to, and it's not anything cinematic. It's the paper. Somebody, somewhere, printed those packets. Somebody drafted the emails with the typo and sent them out in a template, and 5 adults in my school district copied and pasted and hit send and drove over on a weeknight in February to read them out loud at me, and they will do it again to somebody else, in some other school. Next February, probably. I still teach the unit. I still show the same clips. The radiator still clangs when the boiler kicks on in the morning. Nothing about the day looks any different from before. That's the part that took me the longest to get used to. I took the job at a private school in Richmond in August of 2021, and by the 3rd week, I could already pick out the 10 of them by voice. Not by name, not right away, by voice. They stood in a loose cluster near the pickup line every afternoon, and if you walked past with your coffee, you'd hear the same laughs at the same jokes, and the same lowered tone whenever a teacher went by. The school sits off Grove Avenue, a converted brick building with ivy on the west wall, and a chapel that hadn't held a service since the 70s. I taught music, grades 4 through 8, plus a small chamber group after hours. First year at that school, 3rd year teaching in general. I'd come down from a public magnet in Baltimore, where the biggest fight I ever had with a parent was over an unreturned recorder. The head of school, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, gave me the tour on my first day. When we passed the small conference room off the main hall, he tapped the door and said, "The Parents Association meets here. Very active group, very generous." He smiled the way people smile at insurance forms. By late September, I started noticing the pattern. Open classroom day is once a semester at most private schools. At this one, parents could sit in on any lesson with 24 hours notice, and the same 10 showed up on rotation. Never the parents of my quiet kids, never the parents whose kids I actually needed to talk to. Just these 10. They'd sit in the back on the folding chairs the janitor pulled out, notebooks open, pens moving. When I taught rhythm, they wrote. When I played a recording, they wrote. One woman, Marlene, wore the same navy cardigan every visit and touched a small silver cross at her neck when she was thinking. Another, a retired attorney everyone called Hank, sat with his ankles crossed and never wrote at all. He just watched. The first letter to the head of school landed on a Thursday. I didn't see it. He called me in and read the relevant part out loud, very gently. "Miss," he said, using the name the kids called me. One of the parents felt that the lesson on syncopation strayed into content more appropriate for older students. Something about the recording you used. I asked which recording. He wasn't sure. I asked which parent. He wasn't at liberty. I'd been building the fall curriculum around American composers. It was 2021. We'd all just come back from the long, strange year of Zoom lessons, and I wanted the kids to hear music tied to the country they were actually living in. I put together a unit with Copland, Ives, Florence Price, William Grant Still, and a short piano piece by John Adams that I loved. The morning I posted the unit outline to the parent portal, a man knocked on my classroom door before first period. Tall, gray at the temples, khakis, and a blue button-down. The kind of dad who looks like every other dad at that kind of school. He introduced himself as Wes. His daughter was in 5th grade. He smiled the whole time. "I saw your unit for the fall," he said. "The Adams piece and the 2 you added at the end. Price and Still." He said the names carefully, like he'd been practicing them. "Beautiful choices, honestly, but I wanted to ask if you'd consider pulling them." I asked why. He kept smiling. "We have traditions here," he said. "At the school, in the music program. We like to keep to them. Nothing personal." I told him I'd think about it. He thanked me like I'd already agreed and left. His shoes made no sound on the wood floor. Over the next 2 weeks, I got 3 more letters through the head of school, all anonymous in his retelling. One said my tempo choices in the chamber group were aggressive. One said I'd been overheard telling a student to stop apologizing so much, which apparently was not consistent with school values. The third said a parent had concerns about my political framing of a piece by Aaron Copland. Copland. I read that one twice. One evening in early October, I stayed late to grade listening quizzes and pulled up the association's board in the online directory. Wes had been on it for 11 years, Hank for 15, Marlene since 2004. The bylaws said the seats were annual. Nobody had rotated off in a decade. I started sleeping badly, not from fear exactly, more from the feeling of being pulled at from every side by hands you couldn't see. I'd wake up at 4 and lie there rehearsing conversations I hadn't had yet. There's a woman named Bev who runs the front office. She's been there 31 years and outlasted 4 heads of school. She caught me at the coffee pot in the teacher's lounge one Friday and just watched me for a minute before she spoke. "You're pale," she said. "You eating?" I told her I was fine. She waited. Then she said, "Miss, do you know how many music teachers we've had in the last 5 years?" I said no. She held up 4 fingers. She wouldn't say more in the lounge. She said if I wanted to talk, I could come by her house Saturday. She lived over in Lakeside. She'd make coffee. I went. She had photos of former teachers stuck to her fridge with magnets, still there, like a scrapbook of the ones who didn't make it. She named them. Ellen, who taught music before me, gone after a semester. Before her, a man named Devin, gone after 18 months. Before him, 2 others. All 4 had crossed the same group of parents. All 4 had gotten the letters. All 4 had eventually just quit. One in the middle of a school year. "They don't do anything you can point to?" Bev said. "That's the trick. They just keep it up until you decide it isn't worth it." I drove home that afternoon and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time with the engine off. Then I went inside and wrote an email to the State Music Educators Association. I laid out everything. Dates, the letters as I remembered them, Wes, the 4 teachers, what Bev had said. I attached the curriculum. I sent it before I could talk myself out of it. They wrote back Monday. Not a form letter. A woman named Priya, staff attorney for the association, asked if I could come in for a consultation that week. I went on Wednesday during my off period, sat in a small conference room in a strip mall off Broad Street, and we talked for 2 hours. She took notes on a yellow pad. At the end, she said the pattern I was describing had a name and a shape, and it wasn't unique to my school. Then she told me exactly what to document and how. The gist was this: do not pull any composer without a written cited reason. Anchor every unit to the Virginia Standards of Learning for Music Education and the national ones underneath. Copy the head of school on every curriculum decision, in writing, with the standard number attached. Do not respond to anonymous complaints. Do not attend informal meetings without asking for the agenda in writing first. If Wes or anyone else came to my classroom door, keep it open, take notes right after, and email a summary to the head that same day. I did all of it, every piece. I sent the head of school a fall curriculum memo with a paragraph tying each composer to a specific state standard. Not one line I couldn't defend in a room full of lawyers. When the next letter came through him, I asked in writing for the specific policy the complaint referenced. There wasn't one. The head, to his credit, started to look tired in a different way after that. Less at me. Wes came back once more, in late October. Same khakis, same smile. He asked if I'd had time to reconsider the unit. I said I appreciated his input and had reviewed the material against the state framework, and everything was aligned. I said I'd be happy to share the alignment document with him if he wanted a copy. His smile stayed on his face like a hat someone had forgotten they were wearing. He said that wouldn't be necessary. He left. The letters slowed after that. By November, there was one every couple of weeks instead of 2 a week. By January, none. Marlene stopped coming to my classroom in February. Hank showed up once more in March, sat through a lesson on Ives without writing anything, and I never saw him in the room again. The whole group still stood by the pickup line in the afternoons, still laughed at the same jokes. I still walked past them with my coffee. They just stopped writing me down. I'm in my 4th year at the school now. I teach Florence Price to the 5th graders every fall. The head of school retired in June, and the new one asked me, in our first meeting, whether I'd been happy in the department. I told her yes, that was mostly true. The bridge out of Piedras Negras in June feels like standing inside a hairdryer. Heat rolls off the asphalt and you can smell diesel and the river underneath it. That muddy, warm smell the Rio Grande has when it hasn't rained. I was working the pedestrian booth in Eagle Pass that summer. Second shift, 4 to midnight. COVID had already killed most of the traffic. Where we used to have lines wrapping back to the middle of the bridge, we had maybe one person every 10 minutes. Everyone in masks, or trying. My booth had a plexiglass shield that fogged up if you talked too close, and a little AC unit that rattled like coins in a dryer. The guy came through around 8. I remember because I had just eaten half a sandwich and was thinking about the other half. Middle-aged, maybe 45, short black hair, no gray, polo shirt tucked in, jeans, small black carry-on. He wasn't sweating. That was the first thing I noticed. Everyone else came through soaked, and he looked like he had walked out of a hotel lobby. He slid his passport under the plexiglass. Blue book, U.S. citizen. No expression. Purpose of your visit to Mexico? Family, he said. Flat voice. No accent I could place. I scanned the passport. The screen loaded slow, and the crossing history opened up in the right panel. That's where I stopped. 14 entries. Same document number, same name, same date of birth. That by itself was normal. Plenty of people crossed that often for work. What wasn't normal was the list. The last crossing was 3 weeks ago. Before that, a month, then 2 months, regular. And it kept going back. 2019, 2017, 2014, 2011, 2008, then 2003. The oldest entry for this passport was March 2003. I scrolled the list slowly. April 2004. 2 crossings in 1 week in November 2006, a gap from 2009 to early 2010, then one every month again like clockwork. Sometimes he came in through Laredo, sometimes through Del Rio, twice through Presidio, all Texas, all under the same number. I looked at the book in my hand. It was the current version, the one they started issuing after the redesign. This book couldn't have existed in 2003. Different template, different security features. The one he handed me was maybe 4 or 5 years old at most. Now, this happens sometimes. People get new passports. The system carries over the identity, links old records to the new document. Fine. But when you scan the current book, the crossing history should be attached to that book's issue date, or the identity number should show a chain of prior documents. There was no chain, just 14 entries on this book, 17 years deep. I opened the identity file. Same name, same DOB, same city of birth in Ohio, same address in Houston, same photo. The photo in the file was the passport photo. I clicked to enlarge it. The metadata said the photo had been in his file since March 2003. I clicked the current passport photo, same image, bit for bit. Not a similar picture, not the same person photographed twice, not a copy. The same file, the same lighting, the same little bit of shadow under his left ear. I looked up, he was standing there. Same face as the picture. Same face as the picture from 2003. Not younger, not older, same guy. I'm going to be honest. My first thought wasn't fear. My first thought was that somebody was messing with the system, or with me. Some kind of test. They ran tests on us sometimes, fake watch list entries to see if we caught them. My supervisor liked to remind us we were being audited, or maybe just bad data entry from way back, a duplicated file. Something a summer intern did that got copied forward every time the system upgraded. Boring answers, probably one of those. 1 second, sir. He nodded, didn't ask why, didn't fidget, just stood there with his hands relaxed on the counter. I picked up the phone and called the tech booth. We had a system admin on shift, a guy we called Ruben. He answered on the 3rd ring. I told him I had a passport pulling up crossing history that predated the document. Told him the number. 14 entries back to 2003. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, yeah, that happens sometimes with reissues. The old document's history gets tied to the new one. Usually not that clean, but it happens. The photo is the same, I said. The photo? The file photo from 2003 is the same file as the one on the passport in my hand right now. Same bytes. It's the same file. He asked me to hold. I heard him typing. The record looks clean on my end. Do you have a flag reason? That's the thing. I didn't. Nothing in the entries said watch list, of interest, detained, anything. 14 clean crossings. Purpose filled in every time. Family, 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 business, family, all the way down. No violations. No secondary inspection. Nothing. One entry had a random inspection code from 2007. I pulled that up too. Bag searched at Laredo. Officer noted a bottle of ibuprofen and a paperback book. Under description of subject, the officer had typed male, mid-40s, no distinguishing marks. Same officer, if you looked him up, had retired in 2012. I looked at the man again. He was looking at the little TV above my booth that ran a loop of the flag and a public service announcement about masks. He wasn't watching it, just looking in that direction. Patient. Can you refresh the record? Refresh it how? Pull it again from the main. He sighed, but he did it. I watched my screen. It flickered. Same record. 14 entries. Is there any way this record was altered? Backdated? To what end? I didn't have an answer. If you don't have a flag reason, and the record is clean, you have to process him. You know that. I did know that. I ran through my head what I would write in a report if I detained this man. Passport valid, identity confirmed, history clean. Reason for secondary inspection, sir? He looks the same as his 2003 photo. That's what I would have to put down, in writing. With my name on it, I stamped his passport. Welcome back. He took the book. Thank you. I looked at him, really looked. I wanted him to know I had seen the record. I wanted some flicker in his face, some small thing that told me he understood what I had just seen and had chosen to let me see it. He looked back at me. His eyes were brown, regular brown. He wasn't smiling, and he wasn't not smiling. He was just looking, the way you look at a cashier when you're waiting for your change. Then he turned and walked toward the gate. I watched him go. He had a small limp on the right side, so faint you'd miss it if you weren't looking. He passed through the second checkpoint, handed his declaration form, kept walking. Out into the parking area, out of my field of view. I ate the second half of my sandwich. It tasted like nothing. I thought about him for the rest of the shift, where he was going, whether somebody was picking him up on the Mexican side, whether he had a family, or whether family was just the word that fit in that box on the form. I stayed on shift till midnight. Nothing else happened. I processed maybe 6 more people, mostly truckers, one woman with a little dog and a carrier. At the end of the shift, I walked over to Ruben's office. He was leaning back, feet on the desk, watching something on his phone. Did you look at that record after? What record? I told him again. The name, the document number, 14 crossings, 2003. He put his phone down, turned to his terminal, typed. He looked at his screen for a long time. Then he said, "This guy crosses through here every month, dude. Look, every 4 weeks, give or take a couple days, going back years. I know. That's what I called you about. Then what's the problem?" I didn't know how to say it. I said, "The photo, from 2003. He shrugged. "System's clean. I told you." I asked him to look at the photos side by side. He pulled them up, looked at them, said, "Yeah, that's the same guy. That's the same file, not the same guy, the same picture." He clicked around, zoomed in, zoomed out. Then he said, "I don't know what to tell you. If it bothers you, write it up. Nothing's going to happen with it, but you can write it up." I didn't write it up. That was almost 4 years ago. I still work the same bridge. Different booth now. I got moved to vehicles, but I check every so often when it's slow, and I pull his record. The list has kept growing. It's past 60 entries now. Same photo, same everything. Last crossing was 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday. Pedestrian lane, like always. Somebody's processing him every time. I've asked around, careful, not naming him. Nobody remembers him specifically. Everybody says the same thing Ruben said. If the record's clean, you process him. I don't know what he is. I don't know if he's a person, or a placeholder, or something somebody put in the system a long time ago and forgot about, and he walks through because the machine says he can. I don't think it's ghosts, and I don't think it's aliens. I think it's something a lot more boring than that, and that's what bothers me. He comes through every month. Nobody stops him. I'm not going to be the one who does. That's all for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm curious which story you like most, so let me know in the comments. And don't forget, there are more scary vids waiting for you on the channel. See you soon. Bye.